Hello everyone, my name is Alison Haigh. I work in the residential team at Buttress Architects in Manchester. Residential is the primary driver of tall buildings in the UK, and in London accounts for 89% of schemes in the pipeline, which would equate to 110,000 new homes. Residential towers demand greater thought than many other typologies. They affect a wide area and need to be carefully located and integrated. Due to the complexity of gaining planning permission, detailed technical issues often get overlooked. I have provided a due diligence service for contractor developers to analyse permitted schemes and would like to provide you with a very broad overview of some of the considerations. I will focus on maximising efficiency, safety, management and the environment. Tall towers are intrinsically less efficient and therefore more expensive than low or medium-rise schemes. Shape is the most important cost driver in high-rise. It directly impacts the scale, configuration, regularity and efficiency of floors. Developers tend to focus on net to gross, but external envelope costs can account for as much as a quarter of the total bill of a high-rise, so it is important to minimise the wall-to-floor ratio. Typically, the most cost-efficient plan shape is a square. The bigger the square, the smaller the wall-to-floor ratio, and the higher the gross to net. However, planning guidance often restricts the number of units on each floor, and increasing depth needs to be carefully balanced with apartment layouts and daylight factors to avoid a detrimental impact upon quality of life and sales values. Typically, a tapered tower will behave more favourably than a tower with constant plan dimensions over the height when subjected to significant winds. Core and structural zones expand relative to the overall floor plate to satisfy the requirements of vertical circulation, servicing and wind loadings. As a tower rises higher, the specification of the cladding also increases to withstand high wind loading. Thankfully, the higher the apartment, the greater the price premium. This not only reflects the enhanced views, but also the increased exclusivity of living towards the top of a tall tower. The largest incremental increase in construction costs occurs in the 25 to 40 storey range. It is no surprise that the average height of all buildings in the London pipeline is 29 storeys. 30 storeys marks a tipping point for larger piles and the requirement for intermediate plant floors. Reducing floor-to-floor height can significantly reduce costs. Adhering to minimum floor-to-ceiling heights and adjusting the floor build-up can make a big difference. Using post-tension slabs with an acoustic floor finish will be significantly thinner than precast slabs on a steel frame with a floating floor. The service zone also needs to be minimised and ventilation intake and extract coordinated with the facade. Private amenity space provision needs to be carefully considered. The higher up the balconies are, the more uncomfortable the sensation for people using them. Recessed balconies and winter gardens significantly increase the wall-to-floor ratio and cost. On average, the construction of tall buildings takes 28 months due to their technical complexity and the challenges of working in restricted city centre sites. Labour productivity on towers also tends to be less than on low-rise due to logistical factors and increased health and safety measures. To mitigate this, the construction method and sequencing needs to be considered. Maximising repetition through restricting system types, minimising depth of facade zones, and ensuring efficiency of construction through pre-assembly is key. Developers can attract a wider range of buyers and occupiers by offering a mix of uses. However, single-use or tenure buildings tend to be more efficient. Each use will generally need its own entry and circulation and can require complex structural transition. Tenures with the most footfall should be located at the base. Possible exception to this being an observatory, such as on the Shard. Lifts are the bottleneck of the super high-rise. When construction began on the Burj Khalifa, Dubai, in 2004, the limit of vertical height in buildings had more to do with steel cable in lift shafts than any other factor. They weighed 10,000 kilograms. Today, carbon fibre, which is lighter and stronger and doesn't resonate, would limit this effect. But the vertical transportation strategy has a significant impact on core design and cost, even at more modest heights. Berge holds up to 35,000 people at one time, has 57 lifts and 8 escalators. The scheme employs 2 double-decker lifts, which require a multi-storey reception lobby and associated escalators to allow access to both the upper and lower cars. Lift speed is also an important factor, the fastest being 10 metres per second, which means approximately 60 seconds travel time from ground to level 124. Another more recent advancement in lift technology is destination control. Swiping a card on entry to the building signals to the lift to immediately be dispatched to your pre-programmed chosen destination. The horrific events at Grenfell and subsequent and still continuing revelations about wholly inadequate building management, regulations and construction practices means that tall buildings can never be built in the old ways again. All work commencing after 21st of February 2019 has had to comply with the new Regulation 7. The amendment prohibits the use of combustible materials in the external walls of buildings over 18 metres above ground level, containing one or more dwellings, and has had a significant effect on construction. For example, laminated glazing is no longer acceptable in balcony balustrades. It has also meant a general re-examination of fire safety. Demands for a second staircase to provide additional means of escape were not included in the regulations, but cannot be ignored. Many higher-end developers see this as a sales benefit anyway. There's certainly huge pressure from insurers and mortgage lenders to see risks reduced. The greatest process changes will come from having to comply with the new legislation that will come out of building a safer future. The new London plan is already stipulating that planning applications for all major developments should come with a fire statement, which is an independent fire strategy produced by a third party, suitably qualified assessor. Assuming 8 units per floor, the average London 29-storey tower would have 232 apartments, depending on the mix, 464 beds, and potentially 696 residents. Staff ratios depend on the tenure operator, but may be as high as 1 staff member per 35 units. In my experience, the resultant volume of service traffic is often underestimated. For example, 1 supermarket delivery per week would equate to 12,064 deliveries per year. According to London planning policy, 371 cycle spaces and 51 bins would be required, and potentially 14,000 parcels received. All of these put a huge pressure on the ground floor. Basements or podiums can alleviate this, but maintenance strategies and room adjacencies need to be carefully considered. For example, the reception desk should be ideally linked to staff rooms. Top of the building is also crucial. The building will be seen from far away and become a navigational tool for many people. The architectural design should be instantly recognisable and make a positive contribution to the urban skyline. You could choose to house the latest infinity pool, but practicalities also need to be considered. For example, how is plant replaced? The roof needs to be easily accessible, and BMU track or abseiling davit arms provide for cleaning the building facade below. It is challenging to foster a sense of community in a tower. Residents generally move straight from the lobby via a lift to their apartments. Many operators, particularly built to rent, actively encourage social interaction by employing friendly concierge staff, community organisers, holding annual festivals and allowing pets. Providing communal facilities such as lounges, gyms and sky terraces, and grouping many communities of similar apartment types and personalising circulation space can also reduce segregation. However, these need to be carefully located. For example, locating a free weights gym on the top floor will require significant acoustic separation, a step floor slab to provide level access, an increased floor-to-floor height and is perhaps more suited to the basement. High-quality public realm is essential to accommodate pedestrian movement. Wind, daylight, sunlight penetration and temperature conditions around the building and neighbourhood must be carefully considered and not compromise comfort and the enjoyment of open spaces around the building. In 2019, the City Corporation launched the UK's first planning wind guidelines. The standards require determining the impact of the proposed development through computational fluid dynamics tools and/or wind testing. It is important that wind impacts are tested at the earliest point of a scheme's design development to avoid the need to retrofit wind mitigation measures. Understanding the basic principles of wind effect is crucial. As air hits a building with nowhere else to go, it is pushed up, down and around the sides. The air forced downwards increases wind speed at street level. This downdraft effect is most strong where buildings stand face onto the prevailing wind, which in London is from the southwest. There is also an acceleration of wind around the side of buildings, particularly if it has completely square corners. Channeling, or wind acceleration created by air having to be squeezed through a narrow space, can occur if several towers stand near each other or through arcades at the base of a building. Homes account for 27% of the UK's total carbon emissions. If the government hopes to meet its legal requirement of net zero 2050, building standards need to rapidly improve. Heating is the largest consumer of energy in our dwellings, and due to their compact form, towers are inherently thermal efficient. Creating a place for residents to live in a city also significantly reduces the impact of transportation. Valletta in Bilbao and the students' residence at Cornell Tech in New York both prove that towers can be sustainable. Both passive house schemes employ high levels of insulation and airtightness. Orientation and form are key. The house's north-south orientation maximises solar gain in winter and minimises gain in summer. Its form minimises east and west exposures. The variable refrigerant flow system adds an energy-efficient boost of heating and cooling, which can be controlled by residents via indoor evaporator units in each apartment. The most common form of ventilation in the UK is by means of an MVHR unit per apartment. This requires the facade to be penetrated at intake and extract points, which makes for a very leaky building. Cornell instead utilised 2 rooftop ERV units to serve the residential floors, thus significantly reducing the number of penetrations. In conclusion, the UK needs a wide mix of building types to solve the housing crisis, and tall buildings will undoubtedly play an increasingly prominent role in the growth of its key cities. But they present a significant challenge to balance viability by maximising efficiency to provide homes that people want and can afford to live in, implementing new safety measures, providing new ways of living that encourage social interaction without harming the environment.